Ethiopian forces conducted an airstrike on Tekeze hydroelectric dam, putting Tigray under a complete blackout. Ethiopia's National Defense Forces conducted yet another airstrike in the outskirts of Mekelle, injuring several civilians, including children. Hello and welcome. I'm Lalam Techana with today's news. Here are the details. Ethiopian forces conducted an airstrike on Tekeze hydroelectric dam on Tuesday, causing damage to the largest public infrastructure in Tigray. Tigray is now under a complete power blackout, tightening the siege on Tigray that has discontinued all basic services and blocked the entry of all essentials, including food and medical supplies. This is the second time Ethiopian forces have conducted an airstrike on the hydroelectric dam, with the first taking place earlier in the conflict in November 2020. Ethiopia's National Defense Forces conducted yet another airstrike in the outskirts of Mekelle, injuring several civilians, including children. The airstrike was conducted at 12:30 p.m. and landed in a family's residence with no military installations in sight. This is just one of many airstrikes to bombard the capital, killing and injuring several. Abel Tsagabu has more on this.
Since October, Ethiopian National Defense Forces have conducted several airstrikes on Mekelle, killing and injuring dozens of innocent civilians. Airstrikes at midday on Tuesday, November 30, 2021. No different, injuring children and destroying private as well as public property. Eyob Woldu, a 6-year-old child, and his brother Yared Woldu are one of the victims of today's airstrike. They say that they were at home playing when the airstrike took place.
When the air hits, we were playing here at home. All of a sudden, we heard an explosion. A door fell on top of me, and I fell to the ground with my sister. And then I couldn't find my brother, who had been with me before the explosion. My leg is injured. I was also hit on my forehead.
The airstrike was conducted at 12:30 p.m. in a residential area in Mekelle, leading to the injury of many civilians and damage of property.
That was our kitchen. She was here when the airstrike happened. The children were in the compound. I couldn't find them after the airstrike. I started shouting. One of my children had fallen there, and the other one was on the other side. My daughter was there too. This door fell on my son. The airstrike hit in 4 areas. The 3 fell here. The 4th fell there.
I was cooking when the airstrike took place. Then I moved out to look for my children. I didn't think it was here. Then I screamed. When I ran outside, I found both of them buried. Then we pulled him out. The other one was outside. He ran towards me.
Taye Denda, Ethiopian State Minister for Peace, asked the U.S. Embassy to leave Ethiopia immediately and the whole Africa gradually. He said this in a post on November 27, 2021, after the American Embassy urged its citizens to depart the country over escalating violence and a possible terrorist attack. The State Minister in his post said that the U.S. Embassy has inflicted harm on the Ethiopian state by spreading false information about possible terrorist attacks that he said has caused damage to Ethiopia's economy. He added that the American embassy has proved itself a terrorist, that it is a high time for Ethiopians to say no. The state minister referred to the embassy as cobras impossible to trust and asked that they leave Ethiopia immediately. Ethiopia has recently expelled 4 Irish diplomats, accusing them of helping the Tigrayan government. To be recalled that United Kingdom, Germany, and Turkey and other states have told their citizens to leave Ethiopia as soon as possible, following the almost a complete collapse of Ethiopia's national defense forces and security apparatus. Sunday marked 1 year since the capture of Mekelle by the invading Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea. November 28, 2020 would mark the start of a horrific 7-month-long occupation of the capital by these forces. Our reporters spoke with health workers and residents of the city that took a look back at that unforgettable day. Abraha Gabertensea reports on that.
On Saturday morning, November 28, 2020, the Ethiopian government would start to indiscriminately shell Mekelle. On that day alone, the city would be bombarded nearly 49 times, killing dozens of civilians and injuring several more. Saba Taghlai is one of many fortunate enough to survive the shelling on November 28. She was a fresh graduate in accounting and finance from Adigrat University and says she had hoped she would be able to support her family and do something meaningful for her community.
As you can see, my injuries on every part of my body. My hands, my legs, my abdomen, my waist, and everywhere. The injury on my right leg and my left hand is more severe. I had qualified for a position at Abai Bank, and I was told to report on November 4, 2020, the day the war broke out. I had hoped I would have been able to support my parents and serve my people. It is hard to accept this type of accident, especially considering the ups and downs you have to go through as a student, and especially considering the hardship of my family raising me. The feeling is really painful.
Masarat Yitbarak, Saba's brother-in-law, also remembers the fateful day.
Saba yaw nbacalti gazay man asxaftaya. Anu bxad ina nirna.
Saba is my wife's younger sister. There was 4 of us together. I was speaking to some people and walked some 20 meters away. The explosion happened in a matter of seconds. The bombardment killed 2 of them and severely injured Saba. I survived with mild injury on my left leg.
Issa yaw khabid gudat wazihwa malati. أنا خعانت أرخي ونلو بقليل غير اللي مالتي.
Tedros Aragawi is another victim of the shelling, and he has lost his right leg and encountered severe injuries on many parts of his body.
It suddenly landed in front of us, and we all fainted on our seats. There was 4 of us here. The whole area was soaked in blood. This was an attempt to eliminate the people of Tigray and nothing else. It is really hurtful to know something like this happened to you and for no apparent reason.
Health professionals who were on duty that day also have their witness on the horrific scenario of November 28, 2020.
The situation was really heartbreaking. The bombardments and shellings began at 8 a.m. and it didn't take too long for our hospital to be overwhelmed by casualties from every corner of Mekelle. The injuries were horrible, especially those who said they came from Kabyle 14 and 15. They were badly injured. There were these people who lost their eyesight, limbs, and many parts of other bodies.
I remember it was November 19 in Ethiopian calendar. I remember the day vividly. It was the worst day of my life. We had a heavy casualty in Mekelle. That's the day the enemy bombarded the capital of Tigray, which by estimation could have more than 400 or 500,000 civilians. So we had so many casualties in the hospital. I remember it was in the afternoon. We had so many, more than 55 casualties. And we had 3 days on arrival. So I remember the emergency room being so crowded. It was soaked with blood. Every place was soaked with blood. I remember when I entered the room, our staffs going back and forth, running to help their patients.
On the day of November 19, on Ethiopian calendar, it was a very difficult day on that day. Especially and specifically to Mekelle civilians, because at that day, from the morning 10 a.m. until the evening, the whole city was being bombarded, and we had a lot of casualties in our hospital. It was literally not even difficult to treat, but so difficult even to say what we have seen at that day. It was really bloodshed day at that time. We had plenty of patients who've been amputated their legs, who were bleeding to death. So we had difficulty of treating those patients at that time because we had no enough blood amount to treat those patients, to transfuse the patients.
While November 28 is sure to go down in the city's history as one of the most deadliest, the fresh wave of airstrikes on the capital that started in early October are sure to leave a mark.
One of the better recorded atrocities of the last year of conflict has been in Aksum, in the central zone of Tigray, where Eritrean troops went house to house, indiscriminately killing hundreds of Aksum residents. The massacre was committed on the eve of the Mariam Tzion festivities that usually saw tens of thousands of tourists each year. Sevlor Klema has more on that.
Aksum, located in the central zone of Tigray, is home to one of the oldest civilizations in Africa. It is an ancient and historically rich city. While tourists visit this centuries-old city year-round, November 30 is surely the highlight when tens and thousands of people travel from across the world to partake in a religious festivity. But the year 2020 would surely not be a typical and festive holiday for its residents, but rather one of its most deadliest. On the eve of the religious holiday, hundreds ranging from women, children, and the elderly would be tortured and killed by Eritrean forces as members of Ethiopia's national forces would watch idly. Eyewitnesses, survivors, as well as families of the victims describe their agony.
Because they were scared. There were so many dead bodies eaten by hyenas and vultures in my coho. It became so difficult to go there for their funeral on November 13.
تزرقفهم يصحنا نيرو كاوبك بقلي قالين ركب زنبر ماراج حنتن غاري سب كم بقل خوينو تا غاري غوتا انا ونا غار نصعن.
We found them lying there, and we couldn't find horses or mules to transport them. So the only choice we had was to pull the cart using human beings. They were shooting at us when we tried to bury 8 or 10 children in Arwat Insta church, so we had to disperse and ran to hide. Then we returned to where we were after a while, and then they started shooting again. We do all of this carrying carts. One could carry 4, 8, or 10 bodies. They killed all kinds of people, including women.
They came and took 3 children from their homes. They also brought 2 others from there. The Eritrean soldiers killed all 5 of them over there.
My son was a 13-year-old child. I don't know what they were thinking, and I couldn't understand if this was their intention. He was going to be 14 very soon. I couldn't do anything but cry the whole day. They killed them all. Abraha Berha is a legal expert at Maqala University. He says that what happened in Aksum is a clear indication of the fact that genocide occurred in Tigray, fulfilling all of the marks that define the term.
When we see the atrocities and where they lie under the International Convention on Genocide, there were mass killings, so this lies under Category A in the convention. There was also sexual violence, even on monks. This is another point. In general, what happened in Tigray shows us the 4 acts of genocide.
Abraha also added that the Allied forces committed clear crimes on the war in Tigray and said that they should be brought to justice for their actions.
For example, if we ask who are responsible for what happened in Aksum, the people leading the Ethiopian government, Eritrean government, and their military and those that directly committed the atrocity should be held accountable, not just in the international court, but also anywhere in the world where they are members of universal jurisdiction, including Ethiopia or Tigray.
Amnesty International managed to issue a report on the Aksum massacre in February, while Tigray remained under a complete communication blackout, and the Ethiopian government continues to deny access to human rights groups from accessing Tigray and conducting an independent investigation into the atrocities committed.
A report by the rights group says that soldiers from Eritrea systematically killed hundreds of people in the city of Aksum in November.
Amnesty International this Friday has accused Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers fighting in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region of carrying out a massacre against hundreds of civilians in a likely crime against humanity. Amnesty says that evidence of the atrocity last November in the town of Aksum is compelling.
Mu'uz Gede, a researcher at Tigray Institute of Policy Studies, stated in his previous interview with Tigray television that the intentions of destroying a society have been clearly demonstrated in the past year of conflict, and that the crimes committed in Tigray amount to genocide.
Thousands of innocent civilians has been killed because they are Tigrayans. The political elite of Tigray has been persecuted, killed, and there are many people still whose whereabouts is not known. So the very intention of destroying a given society, in part or in whole, has been demonstrated both in action and from the point of view of the nature of the war declared against Tigray, and also conceptually, which has been enshrined in the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, all has been fulfilled. So from those points, we can say actually what has been committed in Tigray is a genocide.
Mu'uz also added that what happened in Tigray is unlikely to continue to stay in the corner of the Horn, but instead sure to have a spillover effect destabilizing the peace and security of the Horn, primarily due to the presence of Eritrean and Somalian troops in the genocide in Tigray.
Wherever genocide has been committed, it has caused regional instability. What happened in Rwanda has caused instability and political crisis in the neighboring countries and in the Great Lakes region. What happened in Kosovo between the Serbs and the Kosovos and between the Serbs and the Croats has actually caused a problem in the Balkan region. And so in general, we can say theoretically and empirically, we can say wherever genocide has happened, it has a spillover effect into the region. When we come practically to the Ethiopian and Horn of Africa reality, Ethiopia is an anchor state. So anything that happens in the negative in Ethiopia is going to affect negatively in the Horn of Africa. And practically there is also a new danger which the world has to be very careful. And it has to be taken as a warning actually. The involvement of the government of Somalia, Eritrea, in the internal affairs of Ethiopia in order to annihilate the Tigray people and the Tigrayan elite shows there is a build-up of a regional structure of genocide. So this regional structure of genocide is going to be a very grave danger to regional peace and security. It's not only a danger to regional peace and security, it's going to be also a bad example to other neighboring regions, both those regions beyond the Red Sea and to adjacent regions like the Eastern African region and the Central Africa region, or even to other regions in other continents, because it's unprecedented how different states has committed themselves to ally with a government which has declared genocide on its people is unprecedented experience. So we can say it's not only a matter of usual case of lack of peace and security, but a regional structure of genocide is being built up in the Horn of Africa.
A year has passed since the massacre in Aksum, but loved ones of victims are no closer to receiving justice, making their loss all the more unbearable.
The massacre of Mariam Danglet is one of the bloodiest massacres committed during the Mariam Tzion festivities last year. Eritrean soldiers killed over 160 churchgoers commemorating the annual ceremony. The church recently held a memorial service for the innocents killed as the families of the victims continue to call for justice and accountability. Aragawi Gabra Mikhail has more on that.
Mariam Dangalat is a historical church located in eastern zone of Tigray, in just 19 kilometers from Adigrat. Normally, thousands would gather in this ancient church to celebrate Tzion Mariam festival, an annual ceremony celebrated across the state. But on that day, in 2020, Eritrean troops would commit a horrific crime, killing 164 churchgoers. A once festive holiday turned into a bloodbath.
Alexander Burhane ይባላል አብ ባህር ዳር.
His name is Alexander Berha. He was an engineer. He graduated from Bahar Dar University. Last year, the Eritrean troops came to this holy church and opened fire on a crowd of people. Elders, youngsters, children and choirs were among them. They massacred many elders and children.
Mr. Emana, who lost 2 of his children and 5 members of his family, was forced to spend 3 days with the dead bodies and even denied to cry loudly out of grief. He remembered the horrific incident as follows.
We were at mass in the church and later went home. After we reached our house, they started firing guns from the side of the church. We closed our doors and stayed inside in fear. They smashed the doors and came inside. They were armed with big guns. I was sitting with my children. My brothers and his family were there as well. They first shot at the barn and then at my daughter. I screamed in shock and went to pick her up. I saw my son laying there dead as well. Another relative, Isaias Asgadam, was there. He had come from Adigrat for the religious ceremony. He was also killed along with his son, his sister and others. We were helpless. We couldn't do anything. We spent the night surrounded by corpses. Both of my children were dead and the third one was wounded. The only thing we could do was protect the bodies from being eaten by hyenas. One of my sons was a newlywed. He had married in mid-November. He was killed in front of his bride, and she was shot too. I spent the night with 7 dead bodies and 2 injured family members.
This one was 16 and this one 19. The Eritrean troops first killed my husband and his 85-years-old father by throwing them into a hole alive, then killed my sons, though I begged them. I told them they were just children. I had so much hope for my children. I had hoped that they would not only change my life, but also that of their community.
Eritrean soldiers, in further attempts, community would not allow the families of victims to properly mourn or bury the dead for days after the massacre.
After begging for 3 days, we were allowed to bury the dead. I asked them if they would allow me to cry, for I had lost my 2 children and my brothers, and they gave me 5 minutes to cry for my loss. Imagine, I had to get permission to grieve. 6 priests were killed from the church of Mariam Dengalat, and I also saw 17 children choirs of the church of Debre Tzahai, Selassie at Edaga Hamus, thickened by the Eritrean troops marching them in the row.
We were not even allowed to bury the dead. They always threatened to kill us and said, "We will not allow anyone born from you to stay alive." I've never heard of such kind of brutality even in tales.
The Mariam Dengalat massacre, like many others, was not included in the joint investigation by Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN, leaving families to ask when and how they may be able to get justice.
Every inch of Tigray is washed by blood. The mountains of Tigray are surrounded by the bones of victims. We need an impartial body to investigate what happened in Tigray. Properties looted, people killed. We need another body to investigate, one other than the perpetrators themselves.
We need an impartial body to conduct an investigation, a body that cares about human beings. The Ethiopian government cannot be trusted. They cooperated with perpetrators of these crimes who killed all these children. What was their fault? The troops of Isaias Afwerki have killed children and destroyed countless numbers of monasteries and mosques.
While relevant international bodies remain mute on how or when justice may be served for the victims of the Mariam Dengalat massacre, the families and friends of the victims seem determined to ensure that it is.
Addis Ababa University, the oldest higher institution in Ethiopia, released a bizarre statement late last week threatening to retroactively revoke the academic degree of graduated students that it said were supporting terrorist groups. The Global Society of Tigray Scholars later released a statement condemning the 9-point resolution and calling the university's actions unprecedented. For more, Haile Gabru reports.
Addis Ababa University issued a statement on November 26 in which it warned former students of the possible revocation of their degree for supporting terrorist groups. In a word statement sure to spark confusion in intellectual circles, the university issued a 9-point resolution where it vowed to intensify support for the war front and scolded the Western world for support to terrorist groups. The statement condemned what it called undue pressure on Ethiopia by the international community. It is to be recalled that the international community has so far failed to take decisive action against Ethiopian authorities, but has repeatedly asked for an immediate start to negotiations and to end the siege on Tigray that has blocked all food aid and medical supplies from coming into the region. The university in its 9-point resolution also condemned international media for biased reports on Ethiopia and strongly indicated that conspiracies by the US and other international bodies to support Tigray People's Liberation Front, Tigray's elected political party, and finally expressed its willingness to partake in what the university referred as a war for survival. The statement issued on the university's official website has very little indications about the practical implication of the resolutions and how it may affect Tigrayan graduates of the university. The Global Society of Tigray Scholars and Professionals released a statement denouncing Addis Ababa University's recent statement. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals calling the threat to retroactively revoke individuals' academic degrees deemed to be supporting specific political parties unprecedented. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals stated that the statement is contrary to its long-standing values and unfair to basic human, political, and more importantly, intellectual right, and asked that the statement be retracted. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals also called up on regional and international partners of Addis Ababa University to strongly denounce the politically charged and academically irresponsible statement and re-examine their engagement with the institution.
Last week, the World Food Programme WFP reported that an estimated 9.4 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance in North Ethiopia. Ago minority group in the Amhara region bordering Tigray are just some of the people severely affected by the ongoing siege. Our reporters were on the ground to observe the harsh conditions on the ground. Abil Zagabul has more on that.
The Ago are an ancient people living in the north end of the Amhara region, neighboring the people of Tigray. The Ago people once ruled the Ethiopian Empire through the Zagwe dynasty that lasted for centuries and are at the heart of Ethiopia's ancient and colorful past. Now, a minority in the Amhara region, the Ago people are just one of the many suffering due to the ongoing siege on Tigray.
I have twin children and I can't feed them. I don't have any breast milk because I'm hungry as well. I used to pay $300 every month for my home. However, now let alone paying for rent, I don't even know how to feed myself to survive. This happened as soon as the Ethiopian soldiers arrived here. But now as the Ago forces control the town, we at the very least have peace. The fighters help me by themselves. I have nothing to eat. I got nobody else to help me. I'm sick because I have nothing to eat. There's no food to eat. We get these breads from monks. I have nowhere to go. My children are starving. I'm very worried. When the Tigrayan and Ago forces captured the town, they gave us some food that lasted for a few days. However, we're back to being hungry now.
The head for the interim government for the district, Nabratis Fakiros, said that this was mainly caused due to Ethiopian soldiers and Amhara militia that are blocking aid from reaching those that are in need.
The people are starving. The aid coming here was blocked in Kombolcha. Children are becoming more susceptible to disease. The starvation happened because the people of Ago were instructed not to plow their land when the Ethiopian forces were here.
The 5-month-long siege has discontinued all basic services, including electric power and all forms of telecommunication, and blocked all basic supplies, including aid and medicine, from reaching Tigray.
The systematic attack on health facilities in Tigray has resulted in the complete destruction of over 80% of Tigray's health facilities, while the ongoing siege on Tigray that has blocked off all essential goods, including food and medical supplies, has made it impossible for the health system to revive. Our reporters visited Adishandhon Clinic in Magala, the clinic that has completely run out of all basic medical supplies, while it is expected to continue to give care to dozens of children and mothers suffering from malnutrition and many more living with chronic illnesses. Bethlehem Ayala has more on that.
For the past 5 months, the people of Tigray have been under complete blockade with no essential good, including food aid or medical supplies being allowed into the region. The 5 months long siege had been preceded by an 8 months long occupation of Tigray by hostile armies that systematically destroyed health facilities and schools. A children's clinic is a health facility located in Maqala. Doctors and nurses at the facility say the siege had made it impossible for them to continue to provide health care for the patients.
We have 40 patients with HIV, TB and diabetes. We needed to treat them with the medicine we get from Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Agency. But since the roads have been closed, we have nothing left to give them.
We used to give them proper medications, but after the crisis and the siege, we are unable to give them what they need.
Mothers and children have been the primary victims of the ongoing siege. The blockade of food, in addition to a discontinuation of health services, has had a devastating effect.
We have 42 children and 64 mothers here suffering due to malnutrition. We have been giving them medication for some months, but now we can't give them anything.
Mothers and children are so underweight. It doesn't even seem like we can give them a syringe. They're so thin.
The ongoing siege has made life exceedingly difficult on the people of Tigray, especially mothers and children responsible for the primary care of any household.
For now, thanks for watching. Do stay tuned to Tigray Mass Media